do that sort of thing for contrast to kind of offset it and make it kind of pop out at you so that it's not just kind of continuously part of the rest of the vessel. It makes it stand out. So I made these yellow rings out of yellow heart, flattened them out. There I'm gluing one on. Again, this is the top, and this is the bottom section still. That's the base where we put the plug in. And then the second ring, the third one with the little holly staves. And then the fourth and fifth rings. And then there's that little ring of yellow heart that I'm gluing on. So I glued that on and then turned it down to make it really thin. So there it is right there. Then I'm gluing on the feature ring on top of that. And then gluing the other ring of yellow heart on top of that. Again, just sandwiching it in between. And then after that was on, I turned that yellow ring to make it this thin as well. And tried to make them match in thickness. So now, we've got the top section. And what I'm doing here is I'm turning the inside of the top. Kind of, smooth it out. Once it's glued together, I'm not going to be able to get in here. So I'm turning it, getting the contour the way that I want, checking measurements of the inside and comparing them to the measurements of the bottom section, because I want those inside diameters to match. So when it's all put together, the inside contour will be smooth, or relatively smooth, even though no one's going to see it or feel it. And then this is the bottom section, which I've also contoured, because I've got top and bottom sections each on their own faceplate. So I can put either one onto the lathe. I can turn the inside of the bottom now as well, and measure it, and I get those measurements the same. And once I've done that, then I sand them both and put an oil finish on them. And so the inside of the top and bottom are finished the same way that the outside is. They're smooth, they're sanded down. I sand to about 400 grit, and then I put on multiple layers of tung oil, and in between the layers of tung oil I use a 2000 grit just to smooth it off. So those are completely finished on the inside. I've gone as far up into the neck as I could on the top, and left the inside diameter of the top and the inside diameter of the bottom as close to being the same as I could. I've got the bottom mounted there, and the top is still on its faceplate. This is the top part here. And if you take that faceplate, I can set it right up against the live center. You can see the marks from where I've done that before. This faceplate fits right into that live center, like that. And it will actually rotate very nicely on the live center, and it keeps it nicely lined up. So I've got the two pieces, the bottom and the top. Inside diameters are the same. Everything's finished on the inside. And then I can put them together. And the joint is right there. But you can't see it because the edges are perfectly flat and they mirror up exactly like they're supposed to. So I don't glue it yet. I've just got it clamped in there between the live center and the headstock. I've got the two pieces clamped together, and now I can turn it. So now I'm just shaping the outside, just like you would any other vessel. And I shape as much as I can, shape the bottom part as far down as I can, and then once I've done that, I'm going to glue it together. So I put a bead of glue all the way around on the top section, wiped it back a little bit from the edge so there's not going to be too much squeeze out on the inside, and then put it back together. And you can can see the squeeze out of the glue up and through here and there. So now it's glued together. The inside's all finished. The outside is mostly shaped. And it's pretty straightforward from there. Now I sand it, put some finish on. I go to part off the top. Well, you'll notice the faceplate is gone now because I didn't want the extra weight on there. So I just took the screws out of the faceplate, left the waste block, and I'm just parting it off even there. So once that's parted off, now it's securely mounted on the base. So now I can just turn the top. So I just shape the top the way I want it. And then in order to be able to do the bottom, the technique I found that works the best is I just used a piece of MDF and made a little tapered plug that fits into the top. And cushioned it with a little piece of paper towel, folded over a few times just to keep it from rubbing and creating friction. And then mounted it up again with the tailstock and the live center. And then I was ready to part off the base. So then the base gets parted off, and then I flipped it around and put the waste block back onto the faceplate and put it onto the headstock. So this is now my turning force, and just the friction between the paper towel and that little wedged piece of MDF into the neck was all that it takes to be able to turn it. You create enough friction that way. Down at the base, I just put it right onto the live center, right onto the base of the wood. And then I'm ready to turn the bottom. And just like you would with any bowl, you just turn the bottom shape and contour it. I like to take it down to a little nub of maybe 1/4 of an inch or maybe 3/16, get it as small a little nub as I can onto that live center. And then get it all sanded and finished and everything, and then take it off. And I use a Dremel tool to just kind of grind away that little nub, and then hand sand it and finish the bottom. And it's done. So that kind of gives you a sense of the steps that I've taken. I think I was boring people, so and I'll pass it around if people want to look at it. Are there questions about the general process that it takes? Obviously, there's a bunch of steps involved. I think that there's 3 things I would say if anybody's interested in doing this kind of thing. The first thing is that it takes planning. You've got to have a plan. You can't just start gluing together pieces of wood and expect it's going to turn into anything good. You got to kind of have a plan. The second thing is it takes precision. You got to have perfect joints, otherwise you're going to have gaps. It's not going to stay together. And the third is patience. It takes time. It's tedious. So if you're somebody that likes to turn something out quickly and have it done, then this isn't the type of work that you want to do. You got to be able to spend some time. This is, there's a lot of hours that go into getting this to come out right. But at least I hope I've given you a little bit of insight about the steps that one goes through to get from an idea to a finished piece. I'll pass this one around too. This is just an example of some vertical staves and a piece of burl that I put on the top.
How many hours over how many days, Jim?
I don't keep track. I would say that I'm getting better at doing them more efficiently now that I've done a few of these. I would say altogether maybe 30 hours of work, and it was probably spread out over maybe 3 weeks, something like that. But I was working on other projects at the same time. The glue is drying, so I'm doing something else. You know, I'll have 2 or 3 things going at the same time, usually.
What do you use for a blade in your miter saw? Is it like a real fine?
It's a 90-tooth carbide, fairly small teeth.
Still get all your fingers.
I do. I don't put my fingers anywhere near that blade.
The only trouble when you're doing stuff like that is the pieces that catch and come out at you.
Actually, I've got a, I think I may be able to show you on some of those earlier photos. I've got a system where everything's held down.
Yeah.
I've got a it was when I was cutting those.
I think 18 looked like it was the one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at this, you see this round MDF disc here, it's clamped down. First of all, notice that this is a sacrificial fence, and this is a sacrificial table. So they're glued together, 90 degrees, perfect 90-degree angles. And it's clamped on, it's probably this long, and it's clamped onto the compound miter saw. Because compound miter saw has the base of it, I mean, they're made for cutting big pieces of wood. And if you try to cut little pieces on that, they just catch in the blade and go flying, like you were saying. So you can't do it. So you make a sacrificial fence with a zero clearance kerf, which you can see right there, and it's set at 15 degrees. So this circle is clamped onto the base of my sacrificial fence. This is a wedge, which is probably about this long, with a narrow gauge wedge, that I can then jam in between the circle and the extra part of the stock here that clamps it against the fence and holds it still. So when I cut that piece from there to here, that part isn't going to move. It's clamped in by that. And this little wedge piece that I'm going to cut off, you can see I'm holding with a wooden hold down, and my fingers aren't anywhere near the blade, which is going to come over here. My fingers are probably this far from that blade. So even though I'm cutting a piece that's only this wide, my fingers are way over here. They're nowhere near that blade. And of course the blade has a guard on it anyway, which swings out of the way when you bring it down. So that's a system that I actually learned from Malcolm Tibbetts, who's a really well-known segmented turner who's kind of famous. And it's a system that he uses as well. And I really liked it, so I reproduced it.
Now, when you make that cut, you leave the saw in the curve, you gotta stop.
I do.
See, that's one of the keys
Do
too.
not pull it back
Don't
out.
bring it out. She's gonna eat it.
No, I'll lower the saw till it's just above the wood,
Yep.
turn it on, go slowly through the wood, turn it off, let it stop, and then raise the blade. If you raise it back up, your teeth are going to catch on something. And that's where you get, little splinters and chips and things coming off of the wood.
So did you start out cutting your rings on a table saw?
Yeah, yeah. I had a thing called Incra Miter 3000
You
or
learned
something.
from Nelson.
Yeah, and I used that for a while, but it was okay. But again, cutting little pieces, it was a challenge, and I had to come up with strategies in order to not waste a bunch of wood. If I was cutting little pieces and I had only this much stock left on a piece of wood, I didn't want to get my fingers in that close to the blade, so I would masking tape them onto another piece of wood so I could feed them in, and then they'd be off a little bit. This way I can go all the way to the end of that stock and not have to get my fingers anywhere near the blade. And it's worked out really well.
I used to watch Nelson doing his rings, he would scare the crap out of you.
Yeah, Nelson Long.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the guy that I initially mentored with. He got sick and couldn't do it anymore. But yeah, very first day I went to his shop, and I just about didn't go back, because he was risking his life and his fingers.
Now, Jim, on the vessel, instead of going to the hassle of making that a compound miter, could that have been just like a piece of 8-quarter stock?
It could have been, but I didn't have that.
Okay.
This is
okay.
that was curly maple that for the bottom one. That was Jatoba that I was using for
Yeah.
this one. And the stock I had for the Jatoba was only maybe a little more than 3/4 of an inch.
Okay.
If you look back at the drawings, you'll actually see I did it twice. Here's the initial staves. I was thinking I would make them 5.5 inches long and 1 1/8 inch thick. And you can see I sort of drew the angle of the stave up through here. Hard to do with this map here. But then I discovered that the stock wasn't that thick. It's like, well, that didn't work. So I redrew it over on this side, where the stock was now 3/4 of an inch thick. I changed the angle from 24 degrees to 15 degrees.
Gotcha.
And that allowed me to, so again, planning is important. If I just, if I had done it this way, I would have had to make a different shape to the top. And this way I was able to control that. But yes, you could have, in fact, if you had a big, thick piece of wood, you could just, but you'd waste a lot more wood that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, you didn't have to do it as staves. Yeah.
Is there a formula that you use for calculating the different thicknesses in the layers? Or is that just arbitrary based on what you like?
You're talking about
Each one of
this.
your layers looks like it's progressively thicker.
No formula. Most of them are 1/2 inch, half. This one was 3/4.
Oh, I'm looking at that other set of numbers. That must be indicating something else then.
Okay, well the numbers, these numbers are the radius of out to here. Once I drew, oops. Once I drew the shape, and I had the center line drawn here, I had to decide how far out from the edge of the vessel I wanted to have the rings go, because I had a little waist there. So I gave it like an extra 3/8 of an inch and drew a line. And then on the inside, here's the inside of that vessel on the bottom, and I drew that one over about maybe 1/2 inch in. And those lines are just drawn to give me a little bit of leeway from the edge of the vessel to the edge of the ring. So I just drew those lines and then measured. I needed to know this distance because that's how wide the segments are going to be. I needed to know this distance from the center out to here because that was going to determine the width of the rings, the segments to make how big the ring was going to be. And the thickness was going to be determined partly by the stock I was using. And generally I found that somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4 works out really well. If you make them too little, if you do it like 1/4 inch, it's just so tedious. There's too many layers. And it's hard to clamp things that are thinner than 1/4 inch thick. They tend to buckle on you. The thicker ones are easier to clamp. And so if you use 3/4 inch stock and you're planning on a 1/2 inch layer, 1/2 inch ring, you got plenty of extra. So you can sand them down and get them nice and smooth and still not be too narrow. So some of it's arbitrary, some of it's just knowing that there's gonna be some waste in there, and I'd rather have a little extra stock to get rid of than not enough.
So you do your final dimensioning basically on your sander, to get that final height?
Not really. What I do is I get one flat surface, and then I'll put it up against that big disc sander that I made, and put it onto that, and get it nice and smooth and flat, then glue it on, and then I'll turn it.
Okay.
I'll put it, every layer, put it onto the lathe, turn it to the thickness that I want, get it nice and smooth, and even sand that surface. I've got a piece of plywood with sandpaper glued onto it, and I put that up on top of the tool rest, and sand that nice and flat and smooth. And the same thing, and then the next disc that's going to go on gets sanded on the disc sander, so they're both perfectly flat. They mirror up nicely. So I do the final dimensioning on the lathe. So I didn't show every single step.
Right.
I turn them, every layer gets turned, just to get smooth and flat and get the right dimensions.
Well, Jim, thank you very,
Thank
very
you.
much for